We have in Psalm 22, this is the famous psalm that has crucifixion suffering imagery in it. And part of the psalm says this: many bulls encompass me, strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. Basically, that turf is going to be overtaken by God. And he's going to lead its supernatural beings like captives in a train.
It is a Thursday night in Jerusalem. The city is quiet, but something is wrong. In an upper room, 13 men have just shared their last meal together. The bread has been broken, the wine has been poured, and one of them, one who dipped his hand in the same bowl, who walked the same dusty roads, who heard the same teachings, has already slipped out into the darkness. Judas is gone, and the clock has started. Jesus knows what is coming. He goes to a garden called Gethsemane, falls to the ground, and prays so intensely that the Gospel of Luke tells us his sweat became like drops of blood. This is not a man who doesn't understand what awaits him. By Friday afternoon, it is finished. The sky goes dark, the curtain of the temple tears in two, and the Son of God breathes his last breath on a Roman execution stake outside the walls of Jerusalem. But here is the question that most people never ask. What was happening in the invisible world while all of this was unfolding? We see the Roman soldiers, we see the religious leaders, we see the crowds. But was there another battle happening, one that human eyes could not see? A war in the spiritual realm, fought not with swords and spears, but with powers and principalities far older than Rome. Scholar Michael Heiser argues that the answer is yes. And the evidence, he says, has been hiding in plain sight in a psalm written 1,000 years before the crucifixion, Psalm 22, the same psalm Jesus quoted from the cross. Heiser points to one of the strangest images in that psalm, the bulls of Bashan. Most readers skip right past it. Most commentators explain it away. But Heiser believes these are not ordinary bulls. They are not even ordinary enemies. They are something far darker. So before we dive in, if you enjoy content like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We cover the deep, the strange, and the often overlooked corners of biblical scholarship. You do not want to miss what is coming next. Now let us talk about the spiritual war that happened at the crucifixion, and what Michael Heiser believes those bulls of Bashan really represent.
Christians for centuries have recognized, and the New Testament quotes, dips into this passage here and there, that this is crucifixion imagery. And you get this weird reference to the bulls of Bashan. Now there are some who would say, this doesn't really have any reference to supernatural beings. Bulls of Bashan. It's just like comparing, they're just cows. It's a pejorative. And they'll go to Amos 4:1, which I reference in Unseen Realm, which is Samaria. It's not Bashan in that case, but you have a reference to the bulls of Bashan there, or the cows of Bashan in that case.
Before we can understand what happened at the crucifixion on a spiritual level, we need to take a trip, not to Jerusalem, not to Golgotha. We need to go somewhere older, darker, and far stranger. We need to go to Bashan. Most people who read the Bible have heard the name. It sounds like geography, a region east of the Jordan River, in what is today the Golan Heights, fertile land, good for cattle, the kind of place that sounds like a footnote in an ancient census. But that is not what Bashan was to the people of the ancient world. Across all of those ancient languages, the root word points to one thing: serpent, dragon, a chaos domain. And Michael Heiser points directly at this. When the biblical writers used this name, their ancient audience heard something we no longer hear today. They heard darkness. They heard the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Scripture itself confirms this. In Deuteronomy 3, the entire region of Bashan is called the land of the Rephaim. And if the Rephaim are shades of the dead, which both the Bible and ancient Canaanite texts confirm, then Bashan is quite literally the land of the dead. So who were the Rephaim? And every one of these texts places them in the same geography: Mount Hermon, the Bashan region, the very territory the Bible calls the domain of King Og, the last of the Rephaim. Og himself is one of the most quietly significant figures in the Old Testament. His iron bed is recorded, his size is emphasized, he carries a specific title, one of the last of the Rephaim. Heiser argues this is not casual storytelling. Og was the final visible symbol of an ancient hostile lineage, a lineage stretching back to the earliest chapters of cosmic rebellion against God. His defeat by Israel was not merely military. Now we come to the image that ties everything together, the image hiding in Psalm 22. In Canaanite religion, Baal was represented by a bull, a calf, the same symbol Jeroboam erected as golden idols in Dan, which sits directly in the region of Bashan. The bull was not just an animal, it was the face of a spiritual power hostile to Yahweh. When the psalmist cries out, "Many bulls surround me, strong bulls of Bashan encircle me," most commentators see poetic exaggeration, a colorful way of describing human enemies. Heiser sees something far older. He sees the Baal cult, he sees the Rephaim. And remember, this psalm was written 1,000 years before the crucifixion. Yet Jesus himself quoted it from the cross. That is not coincidence. That is prophecy written with cosmic precision. The bulls of Bashan were not cows in a field. They were a picture of something dark, ancient, and deeply spiritual surrounding a moment that the powers of darkness thought was their greatest victory.
For the Canaanites of Ugarit, the Bashan region, or part of it, clearly represented hell, the celestial and infernal abode of the deified dead kings. Okay, it just did. Again, I'm not making this up. When you go down to Psalm 68, it's plainly asserted that Bashan is Har Elohim, the same expression used in the Bible to designate Yahweh's abode. If you go to the Psalm 68, the psalmist says, "Hey, Bashan, mountain of Bashan, why are you complaining?" And again, it's because God has chosen Sinai. But he references Mount Hermon there as the mountain of God, and then he describes the conquest of this mountain. God's going to take it for his own.
The sky has gone dark, the crowd has gone quiet, and on a Roman cross outside the city walls, Jesus of Nazareth breathes his last. To every human eye present, this is a defeat. And if there were supernatural powers watching, powers that had surrounded this moment like the bulls of Bashan surrounding their prey, they must have felt something like triumph. They were walking into a trap. This is the heart of what Michael Heiser argues, and the key to understanding it is found in a passage most Christians read right past 1 Corinthians 2:8, where Paul makes a startling claim. The rulers of this age, he says, did not understand God's wisdom. The cross was not their victory. It was the moment they sealed their own defeat. But how? How does dying on a cross constitute a victory over supernatural powers? This is where Psalm 68 becomes extraordinary. 1,000 years before the crucifixion, the psalmist wrote about God ascending on high, striking the heads of his enemies, and bringing them back as captives from Bashan, from the depths of the sea. This is what Heiser means when he says the crucifixion happened on 2 levels: on the human level, betrayal, trial, suffering, death; on the cosmic level, the decisive battle in a war that had been running since the serpent in the garden, since the rebellion of the Watchers, since the dark powers of Bashan set themselves against the purposes of God. The bulls of Bashan surrounded the suffering figure in Psalm 22. They encircled him. They thought they had him. But Psalm 22 does not end in defeat. It ends in praise. It ends with the declaration that God has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one, that he has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. The cross looked like the end. It was the beginning. That is the spiritual war of the crucifixion. And that is what Michael Heiser sees hiding in the pages of a psalm that most people read as ancient poetry. If this kind of content interests you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can keep exploring these questions together.